Hi, this is Jacob Conklin, and you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Addressing? Try it again. Say it.
You don't have to talk on the mic.
You can, just right where you are. You're fine.
Hi, this is Jacob Conklin, and you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
So just say, hi, this is Jacob, and you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Okay.
You don't have to rush it all out. You can pause. Take your time.
Okay. Hi, this is Jacob, and you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Wait, how come? What is this?
What?
What is going on here? Say, hi, this is Jacob, and you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Oh.
Just mimic me. Hi, this is Jacob, and you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Okay. Hi, this is Jacob, and you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
What are you doing?
What?
Yeah, I know. Look at me. Hi, this is Jacob, and you're listening to now I'm doing it. And you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg. Addressing Gettysburg. Addressing. Yeah. All right, now try it.
Hi, oh my gosh.
Don't look at the audience. Hi, this is Jacob.
Hi, this is Jacob, and you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg. Addressing Gettysburg.
Oh, yeah, okay. So say, hi, this is Jacob, and you're listening to, and then pause.
Hi, this is Jacob, and you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Just say, Addressing Gettysburg. Just say that.
Addressing Gettysburg.
All right, one more time.
Addressing Gettysburg.
Now say it like you're excited. Hi, this is Jacob, and you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Okay. Hi, this is Jacob, and you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg. Oh my God, I love Bill Edwards.
From the Gettysburg Tour Studio.
Hi, good night, everybody.
Bonfire. You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg Today.
Podcast.
Hello, exactly.
Oh my God, what an audience! Oh, wow! All right, wow. Oh my Lord, ladies and gentlemen, this is the greatest audience we've ever had. Ever. I wish we could fit them all in the studio when we do these every week. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this special edition of AG Today, live at the Farnsworth House. No. I'm so used to being at the Farnsworth House. This is the first one we've done not at the Farnsworth House. We're at the Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center. I don't even have it written down. I'm going off the top of my head here. I don't even know where we are. But no, so we're doing this live. We got about 50 people crammed in here on the second floor. So when you come and visit here, you can go and say, where did they do that episode of Addressing Gettysburg? And they'll show you, and you'll be like, oh, okay. And then move on to the rest of the museum. All right. And, of course, Ronnie Ronstadt is with me. Hello, Ronnie. How are you? The devil's to pay. Yeah.
I've been wanting to say that all day in this place.
And here we are.
Yeah.
It's appropriate that you're doing it here. So we haven't done a live show in a while because I've been very busy.
Yeah.
And so have you. You had the Rona.
I did 3 years, and it got...
Yeah,
and
finally.
I shared with some of my closest friends, unfortunately.
And you gave it to Tim.
So,
Tim Matthews got the Rona. Good job, Tim. But no, so I've been doing, I haven't been doing really much of anything on Bo's movie, but I've been hanging around it a lot, and I make myself available. I say, Bo, tell everybody I'm like the concierge for the movie. If they want to do something on a day off, I'll take them around and everything. So that's what I've done. And then he roped me into, and he asked me if I would be Lee Major's assistant for the last week,
wow.
Which I did. And that was really cool because, I grew up watching The $6 Million Man. And so when I met Lee Majors, we went up to his suite in the hotel, and Bo introduced me to him, and we sat and talked for a little bit. And then I said, I have to tell you, I loved the $6 Million Man when I was a kid, and I used to jump from the couch to my dad's Lazy Boy and make that noise and try to do it in slow motion. I never could understand why I couldn't jump in slow motion. And one time I fell, I missed the chair, and I sprained my wrist and screaming, yelling, and my mother comes around the corner, "What's wrong? What happened?" And I told her what happened, and she's like, "Damn it, Matt, you're 26 years old. When are you going to stop?" And that was the last time I ever watched The $6 Million Man. But no, he was really nice. It's kind of surreal because I took Bruce Boxleitner on a tour, actually 3 tours.
Wow.
And
that much?
No.
Okay, I was just
that's what I said to him. He was bragging about me to everybody, and I go, "Bruce, I've been making it up the whole time." It's like, "Don't tell these people." He's like, "They don't care," But no, he's really into the history. I think he was more excited to be here just because it's Gettysburg than the movie, Sure. And so they're really cool, but it's very surreal to me to hang around with these people, knowing of them for my whole life. And they're like these bigger than life people, larger than life people. And then all of a sudden, you're just sitting there talking with them, and you're eating lunch and somebody's got spinach in their teeth, and it's like, "Oh, you're a human being just like me,"
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of fun, and the town is loving this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very exciting for everybody.
It's covered every single day in the Gettysburg Times.
Yeah.
Every day, day 8, day 9. They're following the crew and the cast
It's
around.
like D-Day,
Yeah.
D-Day +1, D-Day +2.
No, that's exciting.
It is exciting.
Yeah.
I actually, one of the actors was being interviewed in the lobby at the hotel yesterday by the Gettysburg Times, and I was going to take him on a tour, and he's like, "Oh, just 5 more minutes and stuff." And I go, "Who's this, the Times?" He goes, "Yeah." And I went over to the lady. I'm like, she's like, he goes, "Oh, yeah, he does a podcast in this town and everything." And she's like, "Oh, really?" And I'm like, "Yeah. I've been doing it for 3 years, and I've been on the Today Show and all this stuff, but the Gettysburg Times won't deign to interview me." And so I pressured her into doing an interview with you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
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 I said, "Talk to Veronica. She's much more presentable." But no, that's it. So anyway, this is going to be an exciting night, folks. We're going to have a trivia game later, but our guests are Codie Eash and Pete Miele. They're going to join us in a little bit and talk about what we're going to talk about the seminary history during the battle, as a hospital, and then as a museum. And then we're going to do a little trivia game. Like we always like to do some kind of a game when we have an audience, make it fun for everybody. But first, let's see, who do we have in the audience here? Oh, well, first I see is our listener of the year, Estella Beard, with her... Yeah. With her beaver hat on. And and let's see, who else do I see here? I see a little fella that we all know and love. Why don't you step up here, young man? This is Jacob. Jacob, come around here. Actually, stand right here. Stand right here, Jacob. Stand right there. Stand right there, because they all can't see you. Stand in front. Show everybody your beautiful shirt. Getty's Nerd in Training. Okay? All right, now, Jacob, come around here, and I want you to say hi to the audience, okay? Can you do that? Just tell them hello. Just right into the microphone.
Hi, everybody.
Oh.
Hi, Jacob.
Now, what did we do before? Before we recorded you saying some stuff, right? And what did you say? Tell them what you said. Remember what you said? Hi, this is Jacob, and you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg. Remember?
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
Hi, this is Jacob, and you're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Yes. Nice.
That's good. He puts the emphasis on the ad.
Yeah.
Addressing Gettysburg. So that's cute. Who else? I think I saw 6 Questions Lent somewhere back there. Where is he? There he is. 6 Questions Lent. Haven't seen him in a while. He got a new job, and it keeps him away from us, and we miss him so. Kath is right in the front row. Veronica's mom, Kath.
Chauffeur.
Also in the front row is one of Gettysburg's most famous literary artists, Vicky Castle. Hello, Vicky. And you, Tim, were you saying you wanted to be? Oh, you were waving at her. Okay, good. And I can't really see in the back there because actually these are not prescription glasses. So I don't know if I recognize any other faces. And if there is a face that should be recognized, I apologize that I have what, Mike?
Lewis.
Oh, Lewis Trott. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Lewis Trott. Lewis and I on Saturday recorded the promo episodes for the Get Out of the Car tours this year. Gonna be some good tours this year, folks. So hopefully you'll be out there to see them. Yeah. And I'll tell you, Lewis is a real professional when it comes to getting these things done. Because I think we were hungry. I don't know what it was, but neither one of us wanted to be in there doing it. So we were just boom, boom. Oh, we had no heat. That's what it was. We were freezing cold. Yeah.
That'll do it. Yeah.
That's the problem with solar power. And it was like a week of clouds.
Yeah.
We couldn't turn the heat on if we were going to use the recording equipment. So we're like, well, let's just bundle up and get through this as fast as we can. So they're going to be pretty short, I think, this year when they come out. But that's neither here nor there. Lewis is a great guide, and he's put together a fantastic schedule of tours for us. And I hope like I said, I hope all you guys are going to be there. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a quick break, not a very long one. In fact, people sitting here shouldn't be very long at all, but people at home, you're going to have to sit through 10 minutes of commercials. And that's just the way it goes when it's free. So we'll take a break. We'll be right back with Codie Eash and Pete Miele from the Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center right after these words. Of course.
Been craving a Hot Pocket or a bag of popcorn? Now's the time to go and get it. You've got 5 to 8 minutes, so don't be late. We'll be right back.
The minstrel boy to war has gone in the ranks of death. You will find him. His father's sword he hath girded on, and his wild heart's left behind.
Want the freshest cup of coffee in Gettysburg? Then visit 82 Cafe at 82 Steinway Avenue. They roast all of their coffee in-house and have a full coffee bar to keep you caffeinated during your visit. Check them out at www.raggededgerc.com for their menu and shipping options and their freshly roasted coffee. Use promo code Hancock for 10% off your order. That's 82 Cafe at 82 Steinway Avenue across from the Dobbin House or raggededgerc.com.
Enjoy historical stories on the History Fix platform. Explore movies, short films, and documentaries. Addressing Gettysburg podcast fans receive an extra $5 off the first year's annual subscription. Sign up at historyfix.com and use promo code Gettysburg. Every subscription includes a 7-day risk-free trial. Escape into history with History Fix. Need a Corps badge or other insignia for your uniform? Then check out the Badge Maker. Here's what some of his satisfied customers had to say. Miranda said, I ordered an identification disc from Joe and it's fantastic. He hand-stamped it exactly as I wanted. It has a great rough on-campaign feel to it and was reasonably priced to boot. Greg said, my unit has purchased from him in the past. Quality badges and good service. And Jerry S. says, the Badge Maker is the go-to place for accurate replica Civil War badges. Visit CivilWarCorpsBadges.com and attach a message with your order saying you heard about him on Addressing Gettysburg.
This special episode of Addressing Gettysburg is brought to you in part by me, audiobook narrator Mike Scott, narrator of Savis Beattie's Bloody Autumn, the Shenandoah Valley Campaign of 1864, and Unlike Anything That Ever Floated, the Monitor and Virginia and the Battle of Hampton Roads. If you are an author or publisher interested in having your titles produced as audiobooks, or even just in learning more about the process, give me a shout. You can find my contact info on my website, MikeScottVoice.com. That's MikeScottVoice.com. Hey, historian, author, and licensed battlefield guide Tim Smith. Matt gave me a full minute, so let me ask you an important question. Isn't it about time that John Burns' Hero of Gettysburg became an audiobook? Sickles has an audiobook. You know Jenny Wade is going to deserve an audiobook. Let's give John a shot. Get in touch, Tim. It's MikeScottVoice.com. I'm Mike Scott. your voice of history.
The 1863 civilians of Gettysburg were reluctant witnesses to the Great Battle. Join Ken Rich, the man in the red shirt, for his historic town walking tours. You could book these tours by emailing ken@gettysburgtownhistory.com. That's ken@gettysburgtownhistory.com. And when you're in town, look for the guy in the red shirt.
And Civil War Trails. It's the world's largest open-air museum, and they offer over 1,300 sites across 6 states. Drive the Gettysburg campaign turn by turn, paddle to Frederick Douglass's birthplace, or hike to remote earthworks and artillery positions. Visit civilwartrails.org to request a brochure and explore their interactive map. Follow Civil War Trails and create some history of your own.
You're listening to the Addressing Gettysburg podcast with Matt Callery.
With Matt and Lonnie Ronstadt.
We give a big damn. We give a big damn, and we are here to give a bigger damn about our guests. Our guests are Codie Eash and Pete Miele from the Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center. Now, guys,
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
This
Thanks
is
for being
awesome. Yeah, this is a really nice setup.
I honestly can't believe we're sitting here doing this, and I still can't believe you let us do it.
I can't either. I'm sure there's going to be a phone call Monday morning. I'm
That's why we're not doing it live.
Yeah. And I don't think my board knows about this, but that's...
No, well, they'll find out sooner or later. Wait until the pictures start getting posted. So you guys, when did you guys get started working here? How long have you been here?
I started May of 2013 as a visitor services assistant.
Okay.
I was a month later in June of 2013, but had previously been an intern in the fall of 2012 for the few months before the museum actually opened.
So 10 years.
Yeah.
And it feels like it.
When did you guys start going to the same barber?
that fall?
Yeah. It started for you as a playoff.
Yeah,
they still haven't won, right?
They started as a Pirates playoff team, and didn't work.
That should be this long.
That's why they're still losing.
Got to shave.
That's amazing, though. Like, even your hairlines are the same. Like, I mean, and I'm not making fun because I don't have one anymore. But you got, like,
mine
even
has started to recede.
Is it really?
Since I became the executive director, it comes with a receding
Stressful.
hairline. He still has nice black hair. I'm going gray.
Codie, yours almost looks fake. like you spray it or something like that. I think you need to pluck some here.
Yeah.
How old are you?
I'm about to turn 30 this year.
You should start losing your hair a little bit more. Yeah. I'm saying, you know, I mean, the hairline, it's like a 16-year-old's hairline. Yeah. Good for you.
Well,
I'm just jealous. I'm sorry. All right, so let's get into the history of the seminary here. First of all, before we get to the battle, tell us about why it was built, who built it, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, you want me to take the founding? You take.
Go ahead.
So the seminary ends up here in 1826. It's the oldest continuously operating Lutheran seminary in the United States, and originally was in town in the Gettysburg Academy building, which is still there on the corner of Washington and High Streets, birthplace of the college, birthplace of the seminary first, and then the college. And then by the early 1830s, they're looking to get their own building and come up here to the Ridge.
Yeah, and this ground is going to be originally occupied by what was all called Oak Ridge, as of course it's still known as that further to the north of us today. But imagine a landscape completely surrounded by oak trees, and even by the time of the building being constructed and the first drawings that we see of this building, those first photographs around the time of the battle, you can see the trees that are surrounding this structure. And so that idea of this being Oak Ridge, we can see that evidence for quite some time. But of course it becomes Seminary Ridge when the building here is constructed in 1832. And this building, for the first 63 years of its operation, is the entire campus under one roof. Dorm rooms, classrooms, the student assembly area, a library, chapel, dining hall, kitchen, living quarters for caretakers. All of that is right here, joined by two other buildings that are part of the campus, but are the residences for professors. Those would be known to us today as the Schmucker House, named for Samuel Schmucker, the institution's founder. That home was built 1833 at the southern end of the campus.
Everybody getting this?
And then 1834, another home, what we know as the Krauth House today, for Dr. Charles Krauth.
And I think if you want a little bit of scandal, you can go look into the construction of this building, because it's built by the lowest bidder, and it's built by a builder who we don't have any information on, and the only information we have is that he keeps showing up in subsequent censuses.
Zabawa?
Keeps showing up as having a different occupation.
Yeah.
So they find this guy from Chambersburg who, as far as we know, has never built a building before and never builds a building after. And what does he show up in the census as? He's like a...
Yeah, I forget exactly, but I think he's a clerk in one of them. But this is the only time that he appears to have constructed a building.
When this was everything for the seminary, how big was the student body? Like, I know it wasn't the same every year, but roughly
about 24 students.
25 I've seen. Yeah. And where we're sitting right now on the second floor, this would have been the main floor. So
right, they would have come in that door.
Our audience,
right there.
Is sitting right.
Buford probably walked through that door.
I probably I never thought about that, but yeah, absolutely.
Who thought about that before the show? Somebody said that. I can't. Oh, it was Mike Barisky. He's like, Buford walked through this door.
Huh?
And I was like, good job, Mike. Yeah.
And there would have been very likely a central staircase off to my left, your right. And that's how you would have accessed the upper floors. We recently found some evidence that suggests heavily that what's today's fourth floor was where the library and the chapel were. And
what's that evidence? Why do you think that?
An account by Henry Eister Jacobs, I think, whose father Michael is, of course, a professor at the college who keeps the weather. I forget the exact quote, but he says that it's on the floor that remained unfinished. Which was the fourth floor, and actually, surprisingly, we only have one photograph of this building, of the interior of this building before 1895, and it shows the chapel, and we pretty much are 90-ish% sure we know where that photo was taken.
So now let's fast forward to July 1st. Well, let's go June 30th of 1863. Who's here? What's going on? Etc.
Pete just mentioned the name Henry Eister Jacobs in his memoir, as well as in other publications. He talks about late morning, early afternoon, being up in the cupola. He would have been just a recent graduate of Pennsylvania College. He begins attending the seminary that fall. And he's up in the cupola with his father's telescope. And he says that as he looks out to the west, he can see on the side of South Mountain in the vicinity of Cashtown, Confederates moving through that area, their wagon tops, some dust being kicked up. And he can also see the advancing elements of James Johnston Pettigrew's North Carolinians on Chambersburg Pike. And as he looks further to the south, he sees the blue-clad Union soldiers of John Buford's cavalry division. And Michael Jacobs, his father, would say that this appeared almost like the Civil War is about to meet beneath their feet. Henry Eister says the critical hour was at hand, is this kind of ominous line that he leaves us in his memoir. So he's probably the first person who's up there on June 30th who can recognize that the pieces are in motion, that there might be an encounter here shortly thereafter. And then, of course, we'll see the arrival of John Buford's men, if you want to take it from there, Pete.
Well, I was going to just back it up even a few days earlier, because there were classes that were supposed to be going on. It was the middle of the 13-week summer session, and in one of the corner rooms on this floor, we have a facsimile of the schedule, so we know what classes would have been occurring here Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But as the Confederates move across the Potomac River, the president of the seminary, who is still Schmucker, he's been president of the seminary for almost 40 years at this point, he flees the area, leaves his wife and daughter here. I know. But he, by this time, has become a pretty well-known abolitionist and gets word that the Confederates are looking to arrest him. So classes pretty much end sometime around June 15th or 16th. 4 seminarians are going to join the 26th Emergency Militia, including the captain of Company A, Frederick Kleinfelter, is a seminarian. So there's a lot going on here at the seminary in terms of operations and classes in the weeks leading up to the battle.
let me just stop you there, because you mentioned that he left his wife and kids, and there was some snickers and giggles in the audience. But that sounds crazy to us today.
Yeah.
But there's plenty of examples of that in the town, in the surrounding areas of people doing that. Why was that not considered a bad thing to do back then, necessarily?
From what I understand, it's that, this idea that the Confederates are not going to attack women and children.
Right.
They're not going to arrest. They're sort of off, and it's surprising then that Jenny Wade is the only civilian killed during the battle. But they're sort of maybe seen as off limits, because you see that with who's the David Bueller, who's the postmaster.
Danny Bueller's
Benny, leaves his wife here. So yes, you get those snickers sometimes, but it's not. He's not the only one that's doing it.
And that was not to make the snickerers feel bad, but I just thought that
hang your heads in shame.
Yeah, get out of here. All right, so continue on.
Yeah, so we were up to Buford, and there are two things that I like to say about the building and the seminary grounds on July 1st that really makes us unique in the battle. One is that the area around the seminary is the only area that is continuously occupied by one or the other army for the longest period of time. So from June 30th, Buford's men are going to come up here and set up camp right to the west of the building until Jubal Early's men pull down the Fairfield Road on the morning of July 5th. This area is continuously occupied, and you're going to see that nowhere else in Gettysburg. The other thing about this building is it's going to be a continuous medical facility for almost that entire period. It's an aid station for Buford's guys, 1st Corps, 1st Division Field Hospital, and then a general hospital. So it's going to play all of these roles in medical care for soldiers, and I'm sure we'll get to that.
Well, so let's get to the battle then.
Yeah, okay.
So July 1st, the battle's underway. What's going on? What's the seminary used for? What happens around it? Take it away, boys.
Going back to the evening of June 30th is when we see the origins of this building for perhaps its most famous use, as we all know, and that is the cupola at the top of the building. A structure that is primarily built not necessarily for observation, but for ventilation, so that heat can circulate upward through the top of the building and cool the lower floors. But it's going to be of utmost significance for federal signal officers, led by First Lieutenant Aaron Jerome, who is John Buford's chief signal officer.
By the way, if you're a contestant, I hope you're paying attention.
Yeah, right.
There will be a quiz at the end of this show. All right, go ahead.
Usually that's said facetiously. This time it's literally. But Jerome leaves us a couple of accounts in which he famously places Buford there on at least one occasion on the evening of June 30th, and then perhaps a couple of more times on the morning of July 1st. But there are others up there as well. The youngest person up there is a good reminder of the fact that while this building is a school and a place of work, it's also a home. Lydia Ziegler, just 13 years old, the daughter of the caretakers of this facility, she goes up to the cupola the evening of June 30th. She talks about in later decades, later in her life, saying she vividly recalled seeing the blue mountainside and the campfires that are there and the campfires of federal soldiers beneath this building. And she wonders, whether these men, as they're singing and praying and talking with one another, are aware of what might await them on the morrow. And as we approach dawn, July 1st, 1863, we see a larger group of people begin to use the cupola. Martin Luther Culler, a seminary student, mentions that there are several of his colleagues, his classmates up there. We have other Union officers who are there, signal officers, as well as telegraph operators. And most famously, General Buford is reportedly there when John Reynolds rides up to this building after Buford's men have been defending those western ridges for the first few hours of this fight. General Reynolds is going to meet with Buford somewhere in or around this building. That gets into the idea of there are at least 7 or so different eyewitnesses to this first meeting, and each of them tells us a slightly different story. But ultimately, Lieutenant Jerome, this overlooked signal officer in the grand scheme of things, he'll be up in that cupola until about noon on July 1st, observing not only what's happening to the west, of course, the First Corps affairs that are playing out there. Reynolds Reynolds' death, the origins of the Seminary Hospital, the construction of a barricade on the western half of this campus as a precautionary measure, as General Abner Doubleday called it. But also from this cupola, Lieutenant Jerome is able to see the advance elements of Robert Rhodes's division and those elements of Richard Ewell's Corps as they're approaching the grounds around Pennsylvania College, and ultimately the 11th Corps coming up from the south of town.
There's that famous scene in the movie where Reynolds and Buford are talking up and down from the cupola and all that. Did that really happen that way? What do we know about that scene? Is that more Hollywood or is that real?
So the scene that you're playing out there is kind of, as I like to say it, it's kind of a combination of a few different eyewitness accounts. Two of those accounts are by the principal person who's there beside Buford, and that is Aaron Jerome. He writes an account in 1865. The language, the place that he puts these men differs a little bit than what he says in 1867. But it is that 1867 account that gives us that famous line, "What's the matter, John? The devil's to pay."
What's the difference in accounts between those 2 years?
How many times Buford appears to be in the cupola, you have to kind of read between the lines. Where they met, where Buford and Reynolds met. The first one would have you think that Reynolds is outside, Buford's in the cupola, and the question is, "What's the matter, John? Let's go and see." And then Jerome says Buford leaves the building and meets with Reynolds. In the 1867 account, he says that whole conversation happens while Buford is descending the ladder. And that would lead you to believe that Reynolds is in the building.
The building, yeah.
Yep. And so there's some discrepancy there. But also, if you look at the accounts of Reynolds' officers, the primary one that we often turn to is one of the earliest, Charles Vail, who was with Reynolds when he dies. And it is he who really kind of puts them as their first meeting out on McPherson Ridge near the McPherson Farm. So going back to your question about the film, you're sort of seeing both of Jerome's accounts plus Charles Vail's account because they're meeting here and then they're riding out to the McPherson Farm together.
So it's like a condensed version of several different accounts.
I would say so. And, of course, the film screenplay goes back to Michael Shara's novel, The Killer Angels, and that's what I would assume he is utilizing there is this, variety of different accounts. And there are others, whether it's others of Reynolds' aides who have differing recollections. One time they'll say the meeting must have happened out at the McPherson Farm. Then they come back to Gettysburg and they say, no, I think it was the Seminary building. And then there's even Peter Culp, who was a townsperson who was serving as a scout with the U.S. Army. And he places their first meeting at Buford's headquarters at the Eagle Hotel, nowhere near the other accounts that others remember.
It's like not even close. Yeah, that's weird.
I reckon I can.
All right, well, so, continue along then. So the battle goes on, and what happens here?
So, hospital? Yeah. So, as the First Corps, as the Cutler's Brigade and the Iron Brigade are beginning to arrive here on the field and go out towards McPherson Ridge, Dr. George New is the medical director of the 1st Division of the 1st Corps and is tasked with finding a suitable location for a field hospital, somewhere where the inevitable wounded are going to be brought. Looks around and sees the most prominent building in the area and determines that this is going to be the field hospital. And as I said earlier, there's some evidence that suggests that Buford's or Gamble's brigade had been using this as an aid station, so somewhere where you could be brought to and be just bandaged up and then brought back to a field hospital. But by the time the 1st Division comes onto the field of the 1st Corps, this is going to be the field hospital. And as I like
kind of close.
And as I like to say, it's a really lousy location for a field hospital.
It's a great building, bad location.
Right. And even if you look at the Spangler Farm, that turns out to be a pretty lousy location too, because they're receiving artillery fire on July 3rd. They didn't know that at the time. The lines of battle are still nearly a mile away on the morning of July 1st, so 10 o'clock in the morning, and they don't realize that this is going to fall into Confederate hands by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And they are trying to evacuate. Once that becomes a reality, that this building is probably going to fall into Confederate hands, the surgeons are trying to evacuate people out of the building, but there are just too many. we have names of about 470 soldiers that are wounded and are treated in this building over a period of 2.5 months, but some estimates put it as high as between 600 and 700. The question is, when are the records made? Are the records, we don't really know. So I think it was probably somewhere north of 600 in the building, on the grounds around it, in both houses, all part of this seminary hospital complex. So at that point, really, the building should not have been used for military purposes. And whether it is or is not is another story, and that gets into the big question about, does Lee come up to the cupola during the battle? But really, it is starting to fill up with wounded soldiers, probably somewhere 10:30, 11 o'clock.
The question of, so you just mentioned the question of Lee going up there. So why would that be a question?
Yeah,
what's the impropriety with him using it as an observation post?
So I'll start with what we do know, what the historical evidence suggests, and it's an account written by a Pennsylvania veteran 46 years after the battle, 1909. He tells us that he was in the cupola. He had been not wounded himself, but was captured while bringing in a wounded comrade into this building. And as best he can recall, July 2nd or 3rd, he's in the cupola, and there's a Confederate officer alongside a man who he remembers to be perhaps Robert E. Lee. So if we just look at that, it's nearly 5 decades after the battle, and it's the only thing we have. Lee is an officer who you can trace around this entire battlefield in one account or another, and it's telling that none of his closest aides or officers or those other first-hand accounts ever place him in this building. We can place him in the shadow of it, if you will, in front of it. Certainly his headquarters are nearby, which would make this a certainly possible place that he would have wanted to observe, but that would be point number one, is we just don't really have it in the historical record. But in terms of the impropriety perhaps of using it, the main thing there is once a building is established as a hospital, if you continue utilizing it as an observation post, you're risking intentional fire being brought upon this location. And we can actually see at least one instance of intentional fire at this building. So fast forwarding to July 2nd, there are Union artillerists on Cemetery Hill. And in 1865, a man named Andrew Boyd Cross, who was an agent with the U.S. Christian Commission, he says that he overheard this conversation among these federal artillerists where Lee was using the cupola at Pennsylvania Hall at the college, which we do have more historical evidence of that. And they send a couple of, as he calls them, warning shots in the direction of the seminary building to dissuade Confederates from using this as an observation post because their wounded men are in this building. Now, I think we can all probably sense the irony in that, intentionally firing at a place because your men are in there and you don't want fire to be brought upon it.
Right.
But the last thing I'll say there is we do know that there is at least one Confederate officer who himself says he was in the cupola from the 3rd Richmond Howitzers named William White. He's up there about 3:30 in the afternoon of July 2nd. The artillery firing has begun right before Longstreet's attack on the southern end of the field. And he says that even before the infantry fighting begins in earnest, you just can't see very much. It's completely shrouded in smoke. So the difference between July 1st, when there are fewer men, relatively speaking, on the field, relatively flatter to the west and north of town, it's an open vista. It's useful for Buford, signal officers, civilians, versus July 2nd and 3rd. It doesn't seem like it's as advantageous a position to see from.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about the 3rd Richmond Howitzers because I think that's important to thinking about what's happening in this building on July 2nd and 3rd. The 3rd Richmond Howitzers are placed right off the southeast corner of this building, back through what is today Valentine Hall, the main administrative building of the seminary. And there is artillery fire from Cemetery Hill that is hitting this building. There are numerous accounts of soldiers that are watching cannonballs go over their head. In the case of George McFarland, who's down in what's today the ladies' room. He's from the 151st Pennsylvania. That was the living quarters of the Ziegler family, the family that lived in the building. There's another account, I can't remember his name. Actually, I think it's the guy that Levi Graham brings in, that they go out into the hallway, and when they come back, there's a cannonball in the bed where they had been, he had been lying. And then even soldiers that are dragging themselves down into the basement on July 3rd because the building is being shelled. So it actually probably receives more damage from Union artillery than it does from Confederate artillery trying to get at the artillery up here. And there was another point that I was going to make, but I forgot. No, it happens.
It's all right. It happens to me all the time.
in.
Ronnie Ronstadt, ladies and gentlemen.
So in terms of the damage that you're talking about, is there anything that's visible on this building specifically, and maybe even other buildings?
Yeah, you're going to get into that. I know what you're fishing for. So really, the damage to the building is repaired by 1864, and this really, I think, gets at the way that the seminary has viewed its place in the battle, really up until 2013 when this museum opened. The seminary's mission always has been to train ministers, Lutheran ministers, and so the battle comes through here, and they're really sort of upset that they find themselves, and this really comes from Schmucker, the president at the time, find themselves sort of in the center of this battle. Schmucker is very concerned about making sure that the hospital closes in time for the fall semester. The last patient leaves on September 16th. Classes start on September 24th on time. Wow. He holds the regularly scheduled board meeting for the seminary in August of 1863, 6 weeks after the battle. The town is still cleaning up, and he's holding a board meeting. So the seminary and the college are jointly going to raise money to repair the damage to their buildings, and the damage is going to be repaired by the summer of 1864. There are some places that we suspect, like the gable on the northeast corner, got to get my directions right, that in the damage claim, Schmucker says has to be rebuilt from the ground up, and you can sort of looking at it see that the brick is a little bit
the mortar is kind of wavy.
Are you talking about that window when you walk out downstairs and you go to you walk out, you go to the left, and there's that window that's just like all lopsided?
Yeah.
Is that the area you're talking about?
Sort of.
So there's a lot of settling just through the years that a lot of window frames, and you can actually see the shape of a lot of these windows when they're doing subsequent renovations. 1895 is the largest. You can see how they're having to form these windows to the shape of the frame as the building settled. But if you go to around the corner from that, next to what is now our staff entrance, and you look up between the second story window and the fourth story window, I think it's to the left of it, you can see where it's wavy, where it appears there was once a crack, and that's what Pete's referring to.
Gotcha.
This northeast gable corner rebuilt there.
And then to get at the question that you're setting me up for is the cannonball, I'm sure.
The what?
The famed cannonball in the wall of Schmucker House on the south end, which is always a big stop for the Segway tours and bus tours and bike tours. And so our offices, the museum offices, are in Schmucker House, and we even have a cardboard cutout of Dan Sickles on the second floor above the window. Yeah, right, exactly.
Some Sickles fans.
So, yeah, a couple. This is Battle Gettysburg podcast, right? See, I went
God.
there. Uh-oh.
How could you do that?
Ain't nobody got time for that.
But anyway, yeah, there's a shell in the building, and what the story that I have heard, there's a gentleman who was a student here, lived in this building when he was a seminarian in 1954. He's about 95 now, and he was friends with the son of the seminary president, who lived in that building in the 1940s. And the story that I've heard is that Fred Wentz, whose father Abdel was the president, Fred put the cannonball there as a joke.
As a joke, but was there ever any damage in that wall?
Well, we know that there was damage in the house.
The house, but not that wall specifically.
We don't know if that wall specifically. And it is possible, but what I think is, why would Schmucker repair every bit of damage to this campus and then leave a cannonball in the side of his own home.
For a claim. He's trying to get money.
It's possible, and it's possible that he did want to leave one thing.
Did the Confederates ransack his house?
They did.
They weren't a big fan of his.
They were not. And
they knew who he was. Or they, what?
Yeah, so they know that he is becoming more and more outspoken opponent of slavery from 1820 to 1860, and they ransack his home. Upstairs on the 4th floor, we have a Bible that he owned that was thrown out into the street and was picked up by a Confederate soldier and brought back in the home, and the Confederate soldier wrote a note saying, "This is the Bible that I picked up out of the mud and put back on the case again."
Nice.
Yeah, very nice. 1870, Schmucker, nearing the end of his life, probably getting ready to donate his library, wrote a note underneath it, said that this pencil note written by an illiterate but I trust pious rebel during the sacking of my home and office during the Great Battle of Gettysburg. And there are other parts of Schmucker's library that exist today in the seminary archives that are covered with mud, that have notes from Confederates in it. So they do go through his house.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is it wrong of me? I'm not a fan of the Schmucker guy. With the, just wanting to get things back to normal. There's like wounded men in here, and he's like, "Come on, guys, I got, And then doesn't he repair the damage because he doesn't want looky-loos coming into place? And
well, the looky-loos are another story, and you know a little bit more about that from more contemporary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are any number of sources where you can find, the description of the windows are all broken. As Schmucker says, the sash is burned. There are, any number of damages to the outside of the building. The fences are all destroyed, he says. But yeah, one account after another, you can find, that people are really interested in what this building looks like. And I would assume, because it's already seen as this significant site, it's one of the larger hospitals on the battlefield. But also just the number of purposes that it had served pretty much immediately is being well known. It's a landmark when you look at it at any point throughout its history. And not only is it a hospital, an observation post, but it just becomes this monument, really, that was itself a part of the battle. As another figure we've talked about already, Henry Eyster Jacobs, he says that in 1914, dedicating the Peace Portico out to your right side for the audience, this building was itself a part of the battle. One of the things that's interesting is that in September, so right after the seminary reopens for the fall semester, there's a student named Francis Hoover who writes a letter home, I think to his fiance, and he's explaining to her much of those same things. He goes into a little bit more detail, though, talking about how on the inside of the building, all the furniture is destroyed, and at a practical level for students, there are no desks for them to write on. There are no beds for them to sleep on. And he summarizes it by simply saying, these buildings look like they went through a nutmeg grater. And that's probably a really good homespun description of what this must have looked like. And he says, I can tell that the seminary is in a terrible state of confusion. It was once a beautiful place, but it no longer is. And so that gives us a sense of how people are thinking and feeling about this space at that point in time. And we'll see also, just in terms of people wanting to get even the view from the cupola, the first tourists, if we want to look at that today, making that direct connection from us to them, are the people who are working in this building. We have Emily Souter, who is a nurse. In her off time, one of the first days she's serving here in this building, she wants to get a view from the cupola. People who are here, actually, when there are still patients here, wanting to come in and see the Confederate soldiers who are here, especially to get a glance at Isaac Trimble. And is he really as cantankerous as newspapers are saying he is? So yeah, we see pretty much immediately.
He said nothing. He just stood there.
Sorry. I had to.
That's all right. Yeah.
I would have been surprised if you had.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry, Cody. Go ahead.
The other thing I was going to say there is about Schmucker is he's a man of contradictions through and through his entire life. Yes, in part, the slavery question, in the same sentence in one case, he has a textbook where he says that I'm in favor of universal abolition, and then the same sentence says that, but this does mean colonization. But in terms of the battle and moving on, he's wanting this hospital to be closed as quickly as possible, open the building back up as quickly as possible. But if you read the writings of George McFarland, 151st Pennsylvania, the last patient to leave this building, he says that Schmucker could not be more cordial to him in
that was my next
the
question.
final weeks that he's
Okay.
here. He says Schmucker actually quips with him at one point that if he stays here long enough, he'll have to start studying theology. And if you look at early signatories to the Gettysburg Battlefield Memorial Association, of course David McConaughey's project to preserve the battlefield, Schmucker's on there. So he wants to preserve this site. He wants people to come to Gettysburg, and he especially goes in line with that Union victory narrative. This should be a place where United States veterans are honored so we can understand this great victory of the war. Likewise, if you look at the famous John Batchelder isometric map, George Meade is the signature at the center, but you can see each of the U.S. Corps commanders who were present. And then if you look at the other side of the bottom of the map, you can see all these local dignitaries, and Schmucker is a signatory there as well.
Okay. So it's unfair of me to not like him. And I understand, it's easy for us to say, oh, you jerk, you couldn't let them stay as long as they, but he's got a business to run.
Yeah.
And he didn't ask for the battle and everything. So, okay, it's a hospital for months. What's it like in here? What kind of a hell is it? How many people are in here or have come through here? Start with the battle and work your way up.
I think that you got to think about what period of time you're looking at, and so from July 1st to July 4th, the building is in Confederate. Well, really July 5th, the building is in Confederate hands, but it's full of Union soldiers.
Are there Confederate soldiers in here at that point?
There probably are, but if they're wounded, they're not many. They're back at their field hospitals, west of Willoughby. West of Willoughby Run.
All right.
But there are numerous accounts of these Union soldiers, George McFarland is one of them, who talk about not receiving food, water, or medical care because the Confederates have taken all of the medical supplies and are not helping to treat the wounded Union soldiers. There's an account, I think it's McFarland, who talks about, or it's Jeremiah Hoffman, that there's everybody can hear this man that is crying out for water. And he's kind of dragging himself down the stairs. So it's sort of this drag, thud, and calling out for water. And it keeps getting quieter and quieter. And at the next morning, they find him at the bottom of the stairs, dead. And as we said earlier, the building is being shelled. Jeremiah Hoffman, again, from the 142nd Pennsylvania, is down on the first floor and in the Ziegler family apartments, and finds a lightly wounded soldier who takes a piece of Mary Ziegler's red flannel petticoat and goes up to the cupola and ties it from the railing up there so the Union artillerists on Cemetery Hill won't shell the building. I don't know what good it does. But then you also see some people that are debating the causes of the war. Jeremiah Hoffman, again, is talking about they run into some soldiers that were at Fort Sumter, and there's a talk about what the war is over. And this is in the middle of this hospital, in the middle of the battle. So that's a really great account, and it's from that time period. So we can really think that it's probably what is happening, not written decades later. And then, McFarland is keeping his diary and writing letters to his wife. On July 6th, this hospital is probably its busiest as men are being brought in off the field, surgery is being performed. But by the middle of July, things are going to kind of quiet down. And this is going to remain a general hospital as they're condensing field hospitals throughout town. You end up really with only two left, here and Letterman, both on the ends of town, the edges of town, both on high ground with good drainage and good airflow, which was important. And there are tents set up outside down the front slope. In fact, if you look at the Matthew Brady photo from July 15th and look underneath the tree line, you can see tents.
Oh.
Yeah, if you really zoom in on that, it's So you sort of have this tent city surrounding this building down the front, and then over where the chapel is today, cook tent out back today where the parking lot is. And then, slowly but surely, men are moving off to other hospitals or moving home. McFarland is alone in here for about a week. He does talk about a general jollification that takes place in early September when the doctors and the remaining patients get drunk. And really, really loud, and he has no love for that, but I think they're just blowing off some steam, and this is towards the end. So, I guess the big takeaway is that there, like with any Civil War battle or hospital, there's these periods of just intense action and work, followed by kind of just day-to-day, I'm not going to say mundane, but once those surgeries are done early on, it's just sort of caring for soldiers, helping to clean and wash and feed them, and then waiting for them to be shuffled off to another hospital.
So we want, of course, people to come here and learn all the rest of the story on each floor of the museum. So let's get to it becoming a museum. What I can't believe, and we were talking, Cindy and I were talking about this before, and I think we were talking about it at some point, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, is that they almost tore this place down. Mm-hmm. And can you imagine, ladies and gentlemen, this building not being here? The movie would have made no sense. I wouldn't know where I am the first time I came here if this building wasn't here, because it's a landmark.
That's where you really have to start the story of this museum is in the 1950s, because 1954, the building is being used as a dormitory. It's 120 years old. There are still students living in here. The same gentleman that I was referencing earlier, who was 95 and lived in this building, said that one day he came back from class and a rope had been tied to the radiator as the fire escape. So that was his fire escape. He lived up on the 4th floor. So the state comes in and says, look, if you want to keep using this as a dormitory, you've got to bring it up to fire code. And the seminary recognizes that it'll be a lot cheaper to construct new dormitories than it would be to try to bring this up to code. And you look at the board minutes from that period, and basically in some cases they say by the next board meeting the building will be gone. You wanna?
Yeah. And so it's going to be a matter of locals, concerned Lutherans, Gettysburg aficionados and historians, Civil War scholars who are going to essentially come up with what will be the future of the building. How can we keep it standing? And ultimately, it will be a lease to the Adams County Historical Society, which, going with a previous point we've made as far as where the seminary saw itself in this story, one of the initial points at the top of the lease agreement was that the building could not be used to interpret the Battle of Gettysburg. They did not want people coming here to learn this story. The seminary saw itself still as this place of peace, and that even goes back, to the 1913 reunion, the initial plan when the Pennsylvania Commission wants to use this building as a hotel of sorts for about a week for veterans and their families. There's some initial skepticism, hesitation, but ultimately the institution does come around. Money talks, yes. And even, if you go back to the years right after the battle, there is this one moment where there's a New York Times correspondent who says that as you go around Gettysburg, you'll see everyone capitalizing on their building, on their home, on, hey, look at the remnants, the relics rather, that were found here. You can pay to see battle damage, but this correspondent says there were two places you would never know the battle happened. One was the college and one was the seminary. And that continues up through this 1950s period. But ultimately, the Historical Society is in this building from 1961 until 2011. But toward the latter portion of that, the Seminary Ridge Historic Preservation Foundation is formed in 1999 as a nonprofit to preserve, maintain the Civil War properties here on Seminary Ridge. And a long-term goal ultimately becomes to open this building as a museum, which ultimately would come to fruition between 2011 and 2013 with a large renovation, the installation of exhibits and artifacts, and our opening on July 1st, 2013 for the 150th anniversary of the battle.
A couple of points I think are important not to lose sight of is that this is a very early win in historic preservation. You know, you start to see sort of urban renewal and historic preservation in the 1960s really take off. But this is about a decade before, and this is, you know, you think about Pennsylvania Station in New York City, the railroad station being lost. And other buildings that don't exist anymore. But this was the foresight of, and you look at the Gettysburg Times, it's the Historical Society, it's the Licensed Battlefield Guides, it's the Civil War Roundtable, it's all organizations that still exist today that come together to develop a plan to save this building. And it's interesting reading between the lines of some of the seminary's statements that they love to save the building, but they don't have the money for it. That if somebody just came up with a plan, and I wonder, and others have, I'm not the originator of this idea, but did the seminary ever really think about knocking it down, or was it just a ploy to get somebody somebody to take it over, because they didn't have any use for it? But they knew that it's not that they didn't know that it was important. Yeah. And I want to make sure that's clear. They knew that it was important both in Lutheran history, but then also in American history, and that they were looking for something to happen, which ultimately did happen. And
I have to imagine in architectural history too, because that's the other thing we were talking about. We're standing outside looking up at the building. I'm like, I've never seen another building like this anywhere I've ever been.
Early federal, but if you look at the front of this building, it's very federal style, symmetrical, but it has this stepped trellis at the top, sort of right below the cupola, and that's very Germanic. And I suspect that, Schmucker, who had his hands in everything, had his hands in the design of this building, and he wanted it to be an American building. But he didn't want to lose sight of the German influences of Lutheranism. So he put that stepped trellis at the top. I know, I got some... But by 2011, as Codie said, the building was in a really bad state. And one of the stories that I have heard again and again is that when they started to do the demolition of the interior, take out the walls, they pulled off a wall covering and they found a jumble of wires, one of which was sparking. So that's how close this building came to burning down in 2011. And so, I know. I see some wide eyes. And so it was through the work of the Seminary Ridge Historic Preservation Foundation, the Historical Society, and the seminary, all recognizing that this building needed a rehabilitation, and so raised the project in its entirety was about $15 million to stabilize the building. All of the systems, HVAC, electric, plumbing, were redone. And
no sparking wires anymore.
No sparking that I know of.
Good.
If anybody sees one, let me know.
Don't worry, I've got water.
Yeah, right. And then to turn it into this museum. And the seminary, I think, has they finally get to tell their place in the battle. And we're on the second floor, which looks at the influence that religious beliefs have on the coming about of the Civil War. And I think that the seminary had a big hand in how these exhibits were designed. There were many seminary professors who are on the exhibit design team, and they got to tell a story that is unique in Gettysburg, that is unique in any Civil War museum, but important all the same. And when you look at museums, you think, okay, what's the story we want to tell, and let's build a museum around that story. In this case, they had the building, and they had to figure out what stories the building told. And I think that what they came up with, and I'm a little biased, I have to say, and I think what they came up with is amazing. And I was in here the other day leading a tour, and I was walking through, and I for some reason I was really attuned to the fact that the floors were creaking, and I was like, that is really cool.
that.
You're not going to get that anywhere else.
And those old staircases.
If you get creaking floors in the visitor center, you probably have a problem. Here we want them.
Yeah. So let's. Oh, go ahead.
Did you guys have input on the displays, or you got hired after?
We got hired after. What we have had a lot of input on is the artifact. So. We don't own any of the artifacts that you see on display, and so every 3 or so years we have to work with partners like the National Park Service, the National Civil War Museum, the National Museum of Civil War Medicine to get new artifacts on display.
Thaddeus Stevens Society.
Thaddeus Stevens Society. So we just finished 32 new artifacts last April, and it was about a 6-month process. So we get to do that, and then we get to write new labels for them. And Codie has done a fantastic job. But all of the panels that you see, those will be here. We'd like to do some freshening at some point, but.
And the other thing too that I'll say is along the lines of artifacts is, as time has gone on, we've gotten more specific in the artifacts that you see. Whereas if you were here in 2013, there might have been an example of something that was utilized during the Civil War, and then a few years later, maybe something that was at Gettysburg. The last rotation especially, we found things that were specific to the first day, or specific to this side of town. And so it's not just samples of these items that are important nevertheless, but now we're seeing items that were in the general region where we are. And the other thing that I'll say too is about something that tells this story throughout the exhibits. As an example, right behind us here of the Dale Gallen paintings that are blown up, beyond life size in some cases here, but 10 original pieces that Dale Gallen did, telling the story of the seminary history, such as the one here with Samuel Schmucker and Daniel Alexander Payne, but also the lead up to the battle, the first day of battle, and then hospital scenes in the aftermath.
So each floor tells a different story, and we kind of touched on it, but let's go through them all, okay? Let's, just for the fun of it, start from the fourth down. Okay.
And that's how we recommend our visitors explore.
Oh, really?
So,
okay, good.
Fourth floor talks about the first day of the battle. 6 rooms that take you from the morning of July 1st, 1863, through nightfall. And so you're exploring the buildup of John Buford's cavalry deploying to the west of town, a gallery that features a series of photographs taken by William Tipton in 1885 that are set up as a 360-degree view, as if you're seeing it's one of our best commented on spaces in the building, all the way through the Confederate occupation of the Ridge. From there, you'll move into the third floor, which is going to focus upon the building's use as a hospital and Civil War medical care in general. Following through those 6 rooms, the story of what it's like to go from being a wounded soldier to having to go through the surgical process to recovering, and ultimately the last major space there is George McFarland, the last patient to leave this building. But then also the last final room on that floor, room 6, is dealing with the dead and dying. The fact that there are these men who do not have this opportunity to go home, and the patients who perished in and around this building. And then the second.
Can we talk about the mannequins for
yes,
a second? So the third floor, the most commented upon thing in this museum is the mannequins, and so a lot of times you go to, and probably many in the room remember the old wax museum. Yeah, everybody, I see some head shaking out there, but so a lot of times it's hokey. They did a really great job with the mannequins, and
I'll tell you, when you did the 24 hours of hell,
you left early.
I know,
we were still here
because I couldn't make it through the hell. I'm getting old, But so you guys did this really cool thing where one of you was in amongst the mannequins, like holding still, and then we all came in and lights were down really, really low. We had these faux lanterns in our hands. And I remember standing in there with somebody, and I'm like, what are we supposed to do? And then somebody's like, I don't know. Are one of these guys alive? And I'm like, no, I think they're mannequins. And I had no idea. Like, even though you were just on the show 2 days before or a week before telling me, but I don't pay attention. Veronica can tell you. Yeah.
I won't take it personally.
I'm thinking about the next thing to talk about. But anyway, so we go in there, and I think you were in the first room that I was in. I don't remember exactly, but I just remember going in there, and just as we were about to leave, and, we were like, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So we were just about starting to turn around, and then the person like pops up and starts yelling for water or something like that. And then I was like, oh, okay, this is neat. And then you guys give a little bit of a presentation about it. You should do that all the time. That's really cool stuff. Because I couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those really, I think, we don't have pictures of Civil War surgeries, thank God, maybe. But, being able to kind of visualize what's going on. And one of our board members is a pediatrician, and he came through before the museum opened, and he said to our first executive director, there's not enough blood. And the designers went back and added some more red paint.
Good.
To make it look, one of the things that I think that this museum does really well is thinking about the costs of war. Yeah. The fourth floor, as Codie said, is very much about the battle, and then the third floor is about what happened to these men who it's almost like if you want to go to war, this is one of the things that you're going to have to deal with. So
it's a good point, because there's some pretty gross pictures that you have there.
Yeah.
And I think we should all de-romanticize war.
Yeah.
Because it's been romanticized and glorified, and it's ugly. That's all it is ugliness. So I think that the medical floor is my favorite floor.
Yeah, it's same here.
Yeah.
The way that I like to look at it is you start at the fourth floor, and this is what happened. This is what draws you in. This is what we're most familiar with. It's why you come to Gettysburg, is to learn about the battle that happened here. So this is what happened. The third floor, then you're transported into this is what it led to. This is what it cost. And then you come to the second floor, and this is why it happened. You're expanding that view beyond this battlefield, beyond this hospital, beyond any battlefield or hospital, and going to the question of, why did this happen? And we're looking at the questions of race and religion here especially. But as much as we're expanding that to a broad national scale, it's also a very intimate personal one, because these debates that are happening at the national scale were happening right where we're sitting. They're happening right here, just a few miles north of the Mason-Dixon line, where students are drawn from northern and southern markets and are having these debates that are occurring in the 1830s, 40s, 50s, and early 60s. And so this is really what we're looking at here is all of these different tiers of this battlefield and Civil War experience, but taking that even beyond the battlefield to these bigger questions of what is war's effect upon the human body, and why is it worth it, or the question, is it worth it?
Mm-hmm. And I also think that the way that this museum is laid out in this building, where you're in sort of these smaller rooms. There are no, as our audience of 50 here recognizes, there are no large spaces in this museum. The largest space is our lobby. So it's a very intimate, close, personal story, and the feel of the spaces sort of reflects that, and it makes you think.
Yeah. It certainly does. All right. Well, so ladies and gentlemen, you got the chance to go around before the show tonight. I hope you saw everything. For those of you listening at home, you got to come here to the museum when you come to town. It really is a cool place. It's an experience like you'll never experience at any other museum. It's a unique experience, and you got to come and try it. So we're going to take a break. I'm sure everybody here has to pee, so we're gonna give everybody a little bit of a break, and we'll come back with our game show. So we will be right back. Stick around.
Send email to sales@addressinggettysburg.com.
The glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage generations at the store. He has
Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center, Gettysburg's premier museum, is housed in the historic Lutheran Seminary building constructed in 1832, a witness to the first day of battle. The museum's 3 floors of exhibits connect visitors to the dilemmas that led to the Civil War, provide a powerful and personal view of the battle's first day, and explore one of the battlefield's largest hospitals. No visit to Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center is complete without a guided tour of the building's famous cupola, where on the eve of battle, officers and civilians saw thousands of Confederate soldiers' campfires burning to the west, and Brigadier General John Buford watched for vital federal reinforcements as fighting erupted on the morning of July 1st. Today, you can stand where Buford stood and discover how this view helped chart the course of the Battle of Gettysburg. Your trip to Gettysburg is not complete without a serious visit to Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center, Gettysburg's premier museum. Purchase tickets online at seminaryridgemuseum.org or call 717-339-1300. To get tickets or a cupola tour, listeners may call or walk in and mention addressing Gettysburg, or by ordering online using the promo code AG1863 for 20% off. Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center. It began here.
There's a devil to pay.
If you're a lover of history, then go to trhistorical.com. There you'll find apparel, drinkware, decor, and more featuring a wide range of interests from the ancient world to the Cold War. Looking to make an impression with the perfect gift? Well, TR Historical now offers gift cards and a vintage wrapping service for a truly unique presentation. And our listeners will receive 10% off plus free shipping in the U.S. when you use promo code GBERG1863. So go to trhistorical.com, TR Historical, for the love of history.
You've heard us promote various ways that you can help us keep the show going, but one way we haven't pushed too much is our sutlery at addressinggettysburg.com/shop. That's a shame because we have designs over there by talented artists like Ty DeWitt of 1863 Designs and Mike Stretch of the Heritage Depot. So now we're promoting it. Buying shirts, hoodies, mugs, and other items from our sutlery not only helps us keep the lights on, but it also helps guys like Ty and Mike, and it helps spread the word about the show every time you wear an item or you sip from your mug. So head over to addressinggettysburg.com/shop and grab some merch. It's the perfect Christmas gift for the Gettys nerd in your family. That's addressinggettysburg.com/shop.
For the Historian has a wide variety of titles, new and used, of military books from publishers like Osprey, Gettysburg Publishing, Stackpole, Savas Beatty, UNC Press, and more. I make it a point to go there once a week because I have new bookshelves to fill and I never know what treasures I'll find, and neither will you. They even have toy soldiers, model kits, games, children's books, and more. So stop by and check them out on your next visit to Gettysburg, or better yet, order right now online at forthehistorian.com and mention that you heard about them on Addressing Gettysburg in the Note to Seller box, and they will refund you your shipping. And if you call 717-685-5207 or stop by the store on your next visit and mention us, you'll get 20% off retail price. That's forthehistorian.com or 717-685-5207. Hey, Gettysburg business owners. Winter is just around the bend, and you know what that means. No tourists. But just because people aren't coming to you doesn't mean you can't bring your business to them. If you ship, you're still in the game. And if you're a seasonal business, the time to advertise for your next season is in the off-season when people are making their plans. So what's an affordable yet highly effective way of reaching those people? Well, it's not radio, it's not TV, and it's certainly not print. Step out of the Jurassic era of advertising and run an ad on Addressing Gettysburg. We just reached 1 million downloads, and we're growing by the tens of thousands every month. Beyond that, our audience is happy to support those who support their favorite podcast. So email sales@addressinggettysburg for more information about advertising on our show. We look forward to helping your business grow. That's sales@addressinggettysburg.com. Hey folks, I gotta tell you, this next segment was supposed to be a trivia game show. But if I'm being honest, I did not carefully go through it and form it into a game show for broadcast because I've been kind of busy in the last week, busier than I expected to be with a Gettysburg Christmas, and I didn't take the time to do it. I thought I did, but on closer observation, we found out when the show was going on that it was messed up a little bit. Totally my fault. But we went through it anyway. We plugged along, but it's just such a show killer that I decided I'm going to take it out of this version. If you want to hear how badly we messed up, you can go over to Patreon, and it is available at the second lieutenant level and higher. And, well, go ahead and give it a listen. And while you're over there, maybe you can go and listen to other episodes that have been up there. They're pretty good. We interview lots of people over there, and we get deeper into subjects that we don't really touch on the free feed. And, well, that's just what we do because we feel that the people who financially support us should get a little bit more than just the satisfaction of financially supporting us. So we do special episodes for them over there. So don't you think it's about time you kind of joined the party and went over to Patreon? It's patreon.com/addressing Gettysburg. See you there.
Sucker podcasters call him sire. Here's Matt.
Oh, never doing a game show again.
Sorry?
No, it wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault. I should have gone
Ask
through
the
it a little bit
questions about
more.
the seminary.
Yeah, I didn't realize that you had two sets of questions there.
I explained that in the email.
I don't read my emails.
He doesn't read
This is why, by the way, I was Lee Major's assistant all week this week, and Bo, when he asked me to do that, I said, Bo, I need the assistant. I can't be I don't know how to help other people. I don't know what they need. I know what I need. And so this is what happens when I don't have an assistant. Okay. I'm sorry. Lesson learned indeed. All right. So we've got questions. I'm sure someone has a question about the seminary, the battle, anything you want to ask about. Casey's got the microphone over there. Veronica, while Casey's looking for somebody to raise their hand sheepishly, do you have any questions? Because I know you were writing them down and we had to end the segment. Do you have any questions you didn't get to? Hi, Veronica. Hello.
I know.
Yeah. Hi.
No.
Just
actually,
say
So you did touch on this, but just to clarify, the wounded were not just taken care of here; they were also in the Schmucker and the Kraut houses, right?
Yeah. In the Schmucker house, Eugene Blackford, the Alabama sharpshooter, shows up behind the Schmucker house sometime on July 2nd, and there are these women that are motioning for him to come in. And he goes in, and there are a wounded soldier that is threatening the women with a pistol. And he diffuses the situation and then puts a piece of flannel up on the roof so the artillerists won't shell it. And so we know that from there that there are some soldiers in there. And then there is a doctor that we know is in the Kraut house. I'm blanking on his name right now, but yes, it was both all three structures and the grounds around.
And I think one significant thing to note there too is that in addition to wounded soldiers, as a result of the fighting that happens right behind this building on July 1st by the Union barricade there are a lot of dead soldiers out here too. And so one of the unique things for Confederates who are here July 2nd and 3rd is that though they're distant from what's happening a mile or so away at Cemetery Hill and further beyond that at other points on the battlefield, they are manning their guns amid dead bodies. And we have to question, what is the mental toll of having to look at what happened on July 1st, seeing your dead enemy surrounding you. And there's one anecdote I always point to here. There's an Alabama artillerist named John Purifoy, part of the Jeff Davis Artillery. And he says that when he arrives on the seminary grounds on July 1st that evening, there's a Union soldier who's sitting against a tree. And he can't tell why this man is just sitting there amid now enemy captured ground. And as he walks closer to the man, he sees that perforating his forehead is a bullet. And he says the man is still breathing. And as he looks around, he just sees, as far as the eye can see, corpses. And that night, he returns to this breathing dead man, as he refers to him, and he goes back to him July 2nd and July 3rd. And, just a reminder, ultimately, of the fact that while this is a hospital where men are being treated, it's also a rather grotesque, macabre place to these Confederate troops who are really in a unique position. Aside from what's happening in Pitzer Woods the morning of July 2nd, there's really no fighting along what will become the Confederate battle line proper as we know it on July 2nd and 3rd.
All right, we got our first question from the audience. It looks like a fellow named Ray. I don't know everybody's name in the audience, so when you do stand up, say your own name, please.
Yeah,
I just happen to know Ray. Go ahead, Ray. What's your question?
My question is, you talk about a central located spiral staircase. Do you happen to know what the dimensions are? I'm trying to picture, them carrying soldiers up to each floor, and I've seen some past historical staircases that are real narrow. Just trying to picture that, if there was any idea of how big the staircase was in previous pictures.
That's interesting.
So, look at.
I was really confused because your mouth was.
It caught me by surprise.
Yeah.
Oh my God! They're taking this stuff. Oh, it's so unnatural, and this is going to look horrible, and this is bad, and how can they do that? That looks slippery, and this looks bad, and that's a bad color, and oh my God.
So what's the question?
Yeah, right. So
I'm getting slap happy. Go ahead, Cody. Go ahead.
Late.
Whoever was answering.
So the evidence that we have about this central staircase, there is a piece of written evidence, and I know that you can get to, but with the bell. But when the workmen were taking the floors and ceilings out during the renovation, they found that the floor joists were cut from the second floor up to the fourth floor, right around where the elevator is today. So that's the evidence for the central staircase. But in terms of what it looked like, how large it was, how wide it was, we really don't know.
So there's no remaining or surviving blueprints or anything like that of this building?
No,
anywhere.
And if you have them, please, I will be your best friend. But there are a couple of conjectures that we have about what happened to the blueprints. One is that they were destroyed when Schmucker's office was destroyed.
That's what I was going to say, yeah.
Because he talks about the archives of the seminary were broken open and this content scattered promiscuously. The other conjecture goes back to Nicholas Pierce, the builder. What sort of blueprints does a builder who later on is a clerk? What is he using? Is it on the back of a napkin or something? And then we also know that there were adjustments being made to the plans as the building is going up. So. We don't even know what those plans would have looked like. You want to talk about the bell a little bit?
Yeah. So Travis and I were talking about this earlier. There's the story of in 1832, soon after the building is constructed, what I believe I've narrowed down to Canon Dockley Lutheran Church in Lower Windsor Township, York County, donates a bell here to the Lutheran Seminary. Schmucker had spent a good bit of his early life in York, and it's a gift to the new seminary building. And we know that it arrives here. The seminary sends a thank you note, but we don't know whatever happened to that bell. And one of the suggestions is, interestingly enough, from a magazine article, I believe it's Century Magazine, if I'm not mistaken, in the 1880s, I believe somewhere around 1887, for the right around the 25th anniversary of the battle. And it suggests in an article called Lager Beer in America that this bell...
That got everybody's attention.
that this bell might have been placed at the top of the central staircase of the seminary. I forget the wording that they use, but something along those lines. But for the other part of this that you might be curious about that is not related to the staircase is that this bell had been part of a Lutheran church in New York City that sometime in the 18th century, I think right around the 1740s, is donated to this church in York County. And the tradition was to flip a bell upside down when it was given to a church, and lager beer would be poured into it. It would be duly christened, in the words of this article, by the minister. And then all of the parishioners and locals would dip their pint into the bell and drink beer out of it. And that's how they would dedicate a bell. And that bell apparently came here we don't know whatever happened to it, but it's been suggested it was put at the top of the stairwell. The last thing that I'll say about the stairwell, and this is a really long way of saying we don't know what the dimensions were.
But we're historians and we like to talk.
Exactly.
So, you know.
We don't know that, but try this on for size.
But we'll still sound smart if we give you a really roundabout answer that we don't know what we're talking about.
Is if you go from floor to floor in this building, look at the stairwell, and some of you might have noticed this, that it cuts the landings cut the windows at the northern and southern ends of the building in half. If you take a laser level, let's say, at the floor, on each floor and shine it across, it would land pretty much perfectly halfway in between those windows.
Which we've never done.
We've never
10 years.
Yeah,
we talk about it, but we've never done it. Yeah.
No, but you can eyeball it and see that it would pretty much line up, and that would suggest that the original floors before the major 1895 renovation, when this is transformed from being the all-inclusive home of the seminary to being exclusively a dormitory. This is also when Valentine Hall is built next door, the main building on campus now. But that would originally have been a longer floor plan, either an additional room or just a longer hallway. But the stairwells that are there today would not have been there. So that's another important point, is that there was likely a central staircase instead of the northern and southern stairs that are there today.
I'm not sure I believe you.
Jeez, Veronica. All right, who's got another question out there? Oh boy. How many we got today, Mike?
This is 6 questions.
So 6 questions with actually 6, or what do you got? 1?
Oh, I've got 1, but it's multi-part, so strap in.
Well, we're going to give you a multi-part answer.
Yeah, I know. We're never getting out of here, folks.
All right, so going back to the game show. So who was the brigade commander from Pickett's division that survived the charge and was treated here at the hospital at the Lutheran Seminary?
It's James Kemper.
Was he the only Confederate general that was treated here?
No.
And do you have any interesting stories about their stay here?
Yes.
Okay, who's
Thank
next?
you. Who's next? the brevity is admirable.
You have to buy a ticket.
All right. So go ahead. You want to?
Yeah.
Wait, that was it. You answered the questions, right?
Yeah.
Who was the other general?
Well, Trimble.
Trimble. And then what was the third question?
Any interesting stories?
Yes.
Yes.
Are there?
So there is a knife fight that almost breaks out. Oh, and of course I forget.
Almost like Mike knew the answer before he asked the question.
I forget how this plays out. Who is who? But there are some women that come to visit Trimble, I believe, and and want to go into the next room to see Henry Kidd Douglas. Is this just, I forget who it is, but
they're here. Robert Powell, 5th Texas, is here, and he tells a version of the story.
And he pulls a knife. The Pennsylvania militia won't let these ladies go to the next room, and somebody pulls a knife. One of the generals pulls a knife and knocks the gun aside of the militia, and the women go past, and I think it's Powell who does it. Gets a gift of a pocket knife the next day from some admirer.
Beautiful story. All right, another one. Who's that? Tim Matthews up front there. Timmy, go ahead.
Hi. I just have a real quick, simple question. How much of the land around this building is part of this museum? And assuming it's some sort of private land, I'm sure there are some artifacts that have been found over the years. And can you talk to some of that?
So the seminary, up until 2018, consisted of 52 acres, bordered by Buford Avenue, Chambersburg Pike to the north, Fairfield Road to the south, Hay Street to the east, and the Park Service boundary to the west. In 2018, they sold 18 acres to the American Battlefield Trust. So it's 52 minus 18, which somebody can do, not me.
It's a number.
It's a number. A number in the 30s, I believe.
Well.
So that land and this building is still owned by United Lutheran Seminary. We are the museum, the Seminary Ridge Historic Preservation Foundation, rents the building from the seminary. They have no desire to use it for anything but what it's used for. Artifacts have been found over the last 160 years, and even on some of the floors by the elevators, we have some of these artifacts on display, especially when they were putting in the geothermal wells during the museum project. But one of the most interesting things that they found during the museum renovation was shoes in the walls. Yeah, ooh, yeah. Old German tradition to put clothing in walls of buildings as maybe some sort of protection. And so they did find at least 4 shoes in the walls, one of which dated back to the 1830s, so could very well have been Schmucker's shoe. And when they closed the walls back up, they did put shoes, contemporary shoes, in as a protection. And we had those on display for a while. But, what you'd expect to find around here, pieces of cavalry equipment, bullets, and the like. I don't know. I haven't heard anybody finding anything since I've been here, and we probably would have known about it. So it's been at least 10 years since anybody has found anything that they let us know.
Artillery, because with all the artillery, anything specific to that?
Not that I know of.
Nothing specific.
Specific, yeah.
What was the question?
Artillery.
That's not a question, that's a word.
Of the artifacts, was there any artillery artifacts?
Oh, were there any artillery artifacts? That was just for the people listening at
Maybe
home.
I can say it like artillery? Like a inflection?
Artillery?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I saw the microphone go behind Kathy over there.
Kathy.
Yeah, Kathy. Kathy, you got... not Kathy. Estella's standing up there with the mic. What's your question?
I was wondering if you have an idea as to how many doctors and nurses were on hand at the time, and were there any chaplains with them also?
Yes. I don't know the exact numbers.
Are there records?
There are records,
But,
yes.
Yeah, but not like... clearly not clear records, or how come you're not sure?
Pretty clear, but I've just never taken the time to count them.
Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to hang you there.
And we know that the story about the knife fight comes from a chaplain from one of the Virginia regiments in Pickett's division. So there are some chaplains here. There are some men of faith, Franklin Shantz, for example, who had been a student here in the 1850s, who comes and is delivering mass on the 3rd floor. In terms of the number of doctors, I just don't. That number is escaping me. So thanks for putting
Can
that
I
on the
piggyback
spot.
off that
Please.
question? So I'm a little confused. When you're saying on July 1st this property becomes Confederate territory, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's mainly Union wounded in the building.
Yes.
So is anybody from July 1st through July 4th or 5th tending to the guys inside at all?
You want to talk about,
Generally speaking, no, for the most part. It's just
that was a lot of qualifiers.
Yeah. But there are some interesting anecdotes to that. So the most famous, perhaps, would be Amos Blakesley, who's the surgeon of the 151st Pennsylvania. As the story goes, this is published by J. Howard Wirt a few decades later. But he talks about the fact that Elizabeth Kritzman, better known as Lizzie Kritzman, Gettysburg civilian, who has, interestingly, a few personal connections to Confederate soldiers as well as some U.S. Army surgeons. But one of those Confederate soldiers she has a connection to is chaplain of the 20th North Carolina, Lewis Bickle, who is not at Gettysburg but will serve with the regiment subsequently. Nevertheless, Lizzie Kritzman has a local surgical kit that she apparently sneaks behind Confederate lines and into this building. And it is with that kit that ultimately Amos Blakesley is able to perform some life-saving surgeries, including the amputation of the leg of George McFarland, which will lead to his long-term care here at the Seminary Hospital. But generally speaking, if we look at the accounts of the men who were here, McFarland chief among them, he has a lot of time to write about these experiences in the 2.5 months that he's here. And so we have a rich repository of what it's like to be a wounded soldier in this hospital. He talks about the fact that, as Pete mentioned a bit ago, no food, no water, no medical supplies to be had for the most part. And a educated assumption perhaps we could make is that those are distributed, what items there were, because this is now Confederate held with mostly U.S. patients in this building. That's probably distributed to primarily Confederate hospitals. And so for the most part, the surgical care that we would see would for the most part come in the aftermath of the battle.
That's interesting.
All right, do we have another question from the audience? All the way in the back there. Is that yeah. Is that Elizabeth again? Oh, hello, Elizabeth. Welcome back.
I thought I would ask a question since I got asked all those questions.
It's on him.
So my question is there a way that they kind of organized the soldiers, whether like these, like there was surgeries on this wing of the seminary, there was like more like bad wounds here, like was there a way of organizing anything, or was it just complete chaos?
That's a good question.
That's interesting.
It's good when you redeemed yourself.
That's interesting. So the American Civil War, you see the emergence of triage, and so they are using the triage system here, where they're categorizing people by the likelihood that they will survive, or if a life-saving surgery is done immediately, that will have the best effect. We're not. I've never seen anything that speaks to where people are exactly in the building. We can assume. I think that the one thing is that we know is that the surgeries are being performed probably in that library or chapel, one of the larger rooms in the building. But they're using every available space within the building. There is space that is set aside for the Ziegler family, and then eventually tents arrive and are set up, and you see accounts leading into the August of 1863 of men outside in tents, sometimes cramped, 8 men in a tent made for 6. So again, we don't really have a real answer, but we made something up that sounded pretty good.
I've seen suggestions when some of you might be familiar with Ben Neely, who used to be the director of Adams County Historical Society. And I forget what source he pointed to, but he had reason to believe that it was sort of that first floor, second floor where we are here, these two areas that appeared to be kind of the initial spaces for triage. And that would make a lot of sense, access points, especially here on the second floors where they're bringing these wounded soldiers initially. And then like Pete said, that chapel area, it seems especially is where surgeries are taking place. A good example to point to there is Elisha Rice Reed of the 2nd Wisconsin, mentions that as he's coming into the building wounded, he's directed, he says, to the top floor of the building where there was an altar, and there was a surgeon, I think he says from the 24th Michigan, who was tending to a wounded soldier upon this altar, and the top floor of the building is referring to, what would today be our 4th floor. But there's some question as to, exactly where things were throughout the building, and then especially we can get even deeper into where are pieces of this hospital.
And you want, places that have open space, good lighting, so you get the maximum amount of time to perform surgery. That's why you see a lot of surgeries being performed outdoors. But here, in this case, they were pretty sure that they're performing it indoors.
And one final point there is one of the things that does make this building a good place for surgeries. It's macabre to think about, but it's the number of windows, not only for airflow, but for the discarding of amputated limbs.
Oof.
And I'm sure many of you are familiar with the story of Hugh Ziegler, only 10 years old, who is tasked with taking wheelbarrows full of limbs, taking them from the piles that they're gathered in near the base of the building and burying them.
Can you imagine that?
Attention blue-collar workers!
It would... like as a little kid, especially, like you have to go around and pick up arms and legs and hands, and that's crazy. And anybody else? Oh, go ahead.
Before somebody asks it, we are not sure where the limb pit is. I know that was going to be a question that comes out. My suspicion is that it's under the road.
Why?
Because that's the only part of this campus that has not been turned over.
Makes sense.
Everything else, all of the other buildings on the west side of the road, the chapel, all have basements, and they would have hit that. The road was excavated down when they put the Park Road in, but subsequent roadways were just built on top of it. The old Telford roads underneath it. So that's a spot that has not been significantly turned over on this campus.
Okay. Anybody else? Last Chance Saloon. If you got a question, it could be about anything. Question about life, advice, dating advice.
All right.
Jamie,
I
go
can't
ahead.
do that.
Okay. So my question, of course, since I work at the Children's Museum, and we feature Lydia Ziegler, and we have a nice little cameo of Hugh, do they have any other children?
Mm-hmm.
And where are they in this picture? Because we don't really know too much about them, and I would love to share those kind of stories as well.
So there are 6 Ziegler children, 5 of whom are living here at the time of the battle, and that's Hugh and Lydia. We know their names, which don't ask me; it's downstairs. You have to look. But
it's on the wall near the gift shop.
Yeah, Lydia and Hugh are the only 2 that we know of who record their stories. We don't have, at least that I have ever seen, a picture of young Hugh. The only photograph I've ever seen of him is much older. And I've never seen images of either Emmanuel or Mary, their parents. So, they write this amazing story from the point of view of a child experiencing this battle. And the fact that you have siblings writing that you can sort of triangulate their stories. But beyond that, there's just not a whole lot about them, at least from that time.
Yeah, I don't know of anything else about the children. There's one source that pops up in November 1863. There's a reporter here for the Dedication of Soldiers National Cemetery from the Cincinnati Daily Commercial, and he lodges in this building. And he says that when he arrives, he is given a tour by the patriotic steward of the seminary, Emanuel Ziegler. And Ziegler takes him through the building. He shows him particular spots where he witnessed certain events happen, cases of wounded soldiers, cases of parents coming to find their wounded son a little too late, and he's passed. And so we see Emanuel Ziegler pop up in the context of the battle for that brief moment, but then really nothing for several decades until Hugh and Lydia published their accounts. But unfortunately, really nothing else on the family.
We know Emanuel Ziegler is a soldier in the 87th Pennsylvania, but he's discharged on a surgeon's certificate in August of 1862, and so that's why he's here. The other thing about the Ziegler family is they are not listed as caretakers of this building in the 1860 census. So their time in this building is probably very short. They're the ones that we associate most closely with being the caretaker family. But it's probably less than 5 years that they're here. It might be even much less than that. So and there are a lot of Ziegler descendants too. And in fact, there was an email that came in this past week from a Ziegler descendant asking, "Is there any information? Are there any images?" And that basically told him what I just told everybody here. Lydia is buried in Abbottstown. At St. John's Lutheran Cemetery, and right off the center square in Abbottstown. Easiest grave to find. She's right next to the roadway. Lydia Ziegler Clare. She marries Richard Clare, who's a seminary student, and they get married in the chapel on the 4th floor.
And we've come full circle because where she's buried is right next to where I get my hair cut.
Which is also where Pete gets his hair. So that's okay.
Boy, that might be the way to end it. Awesome. Thanks. Good night, everybody.
Well, that was really good. Thanks. You got one more. Okay, that really would have been a good ending. But okay, go ahead, sir.
No. Since we're at the end, I'm going to actually not ask a question. I'm going to make a comment. I'm Dr. John Whelan, by the way. I've been a medical reenactor for 25 years, and I lecture on Civil War medicine. And I just want to say that I want to give you guys kudos for your display here, because there are a lot of places that do not show Civil War hospitals correctly, where they show the soldiers biting on sticks. You guys have displayed it correctly. And that's what we have been trying to do for all these years, is dispel the myths.
Good.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for your support.
Bueno, boys. Bueno. All right. So thank you, Codie. Thank you, Pete. Let's have a hand for Codie and Pete, please, ladies and gentlemen. So don't forget, what?
Symposium.
Go ahead.
Talk about that?
Go ahead.
All right.
Yeah.
So if you haven't had enough of us, if you just go home and...
Oh, wait a second. This has the other podcast on it, doesn't it? No, we're not talking about that on my show. Go ahead. I don't care.
March 4th, we are working with the other podcast. And 5 crucial days to Gettysburg. So each presenter is going to take a day and sort of go through and talk about how that day brought the armies closer to Gettysburg. So it's our annual symposium. It's going to be fun, I hope.
Sounds like it will.
5 speakers and then a reception.
Who are the speakers?
The guys from the other podcast. No.
Eric Lindblade and Jim Hessler.
Stu Dempsey, and then Codie and myself. And
nice.
There are still seats available, but there are few seats available for the in-person option. So if you are available on March 2nd, I would suggest...
March 4th.
March 4th. March 4th.
If you're available on March 2nd, buy tickets for the 4th.
Yeah. If you're available on March 4th, I would suggest buying tickets soon. But we also do have a virtual option. So if you
and mention Addressing Gettysburg for a discount, right?
Sure.
There we go. That was easy. Thank you.
Mention the Battle of Gettysburg podcast for an even greater discount. No, way to
mention the seminary and it's free.
No, but I will tell you that a way to get a discount, if you really want a discount, and a way to
Ain't nobody got time for that.
And a way to support the work that we do here. We are a nonprofit. Everything that all the money that comes in to make put on these programs and do everything that we've talked about is from the generosity of folks like you. So we appreciate it. Membership is a great way to help support the museum, and you get some great benefits like a discount to the symposium and free admission and free.
So that's how you get your discount.
That's how you
being a
discount
member.
is giving us more.
Membership has its privileges.
Yes.
Exactly.
So if you feel so moved,
yes.
we appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, a couple of other people we got to thank. Bantam Roasters for the coffee and cupcakes downstairs. And he's a quiet guy who likes to stay behind the scenes. Rob Williams from the Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center, he helped us put this together and coordinate and everything like that. So thank you to Rob. If you didn't get a chance to get up to the cupola or you just want to go one more time, he will take people up before everybody leaves, so make sure you find him downstairs or wherever. I don't know where he's going to be. Find out. We got to thank Casey Turbin over there. You wouldn't be able to hear us if it weren't for Casey and his awesome sound equipment. So thank you, Casey. I really have to thank the Addressing Gettysburg on-campaign committee. We got Cindy, Bill, Steve, Maria, Beth, and Ty DeWitt. Also, thanks to Ty DeWitt for the beautiful job he did on the poster that Elizabeth won, and, well, won, I don't know if that's the word, but that Elizabeth got. And, of course, that's the sticker for tonight. We'll have a T-shirt of that and everything if you want to get that as well. Dave Johnson, I don't know if he left already, but Dave Johnson was here taking pictures for us, so thank you, Dave. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, what would this show be if it weren't for... She sees me going. Yeah. What would this show be if it weren't for Ronnie Ronstadt, ladies and gentlemen?
Son of a bitch.
All right. And most of all, I have to thank all of you guys for coming out. You're real sports. No, and I gotta tell you something. I gotta tell you that game show sucked, and it's my fault. And thank you for being patient, Tim. I noticed you nodded your head as soon as I said it sucked. You said yes. I don't need that much encouragement and support, but thank you. But yeah, and I'm sorry for that. And if we ever do a game show again, we're gonna run it through. But I'm gonna wait until my producer arrives in March because we got a new producer coming on board. But he actually has worked in radio, so it'll be hopefully. a little smoother of a show by then. So you witnessed something that probably will not make it out to the public. So there. That's like the first time we've ever had to do that. What's that? Do-over. Yeah, next time you guys could be the contestants if we ever do one again. Don't forget, everybody, March 18th, we're doing a show at the Adams County Historical Society. Tickets are selling, so if you haven't got them yet, get them. It's going to be fun. You're going to get a sneak peek of the museum. And before the general public does, so before the public goes in there and gets their fingerprints all over everything, you can see it when it's clean and pristine and smell the sawdust and the paint. It'll still be fresh. Otherwise, that's it, folks. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Addressing Gettysburg Today is hosted and produced by Matt Callery and Veronica Brestensky, Esquire. Engineered by Colby Sumner and maybe, sometimes, someone else. Guests of the show stay wherever they want. That's not our concern. To be a guest on the show, send an email to matt@addressinggettysburg.com. Addressing Gettysburg Today broadcasts from the Getty's Bike Tour Studios. To get a 15% discount on your next tour with Getty's Bike, call 717-752-7752. I'm Huevos Grande, the voice of Addressing Gettysburg Today. Thanks for listening.
There were many Union men who wept with joyful tears when they saw the honored flag they had not seen for years. Hardly could they be restrained from breaking forth in cheers while we were marching through Georgia. Hurrah, hurrah, we bring the Jubilee. Hurrah, hurrah, the flag that makes you free. So we sang the chorus from Atlanta to the sea while we were marching through Georgia. While we were marching through Georgia. While we were marching through Georgia.
This concludes our broadcast.
Ha 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 ha!